The sound tore through the mansion like a knife, a sharp, trembling scream that didn't belong in a place so beautiful. "Why are you so cruel to me?" The words echoed off the marble floor, bouncing through the chandelier-lit hallway, twisting into every corner of the grand house. For a moment, the silence that followed was worse than the scream itself, thick, heavy, suffocating. At the end of the hall stood a little girl, no older than 8. Her blonde hair clung to her cheeks, her small hands balled into fists at her sides. Her soft blue nightdress was wrinkled, her bare feet cold against the polished tiles. Tears streaked down her face, but her chin, trembling, fragile, stayed lifted. Across from her, Clara stood with her arms crossed, dressed in a silk robe that caught the morning light like liquid gold. Every line of her body was control, perfect posture, composed expression, voice calm in a way that felt colder than any shout. "Because someone has to teach you respect," she said evenly, as if lecturing a stranger's child. The girl's lip quivered. "I didn't mean—" "Enough!" The word cracked like a whip. The silence that followed was worse. The girl's small body shook with the effort of not crying again. Her voice came out a whisper. "You hate me." Clara's eyes flickered. For a moment, something human crossed her face. Not guilt, but annoyance that the child dared to say it aloud. Then, with a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes, she said, "Don't be dramatic, darling. You're just difficult." She stepped closer. The girl flinched. Clara noticed and smiled wider. That smile wasn't warmth. It was power. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from the girl's forehead, her touch delicate, false, controlled. "Now, no more of these scenes, Your father wouldn't like to see you this way." The name made the girl stiffen. "Daddy," she whispered. "Yes. He'll be home soon. And when he arrives, he should see you behaving, not throwing tantrums, not crying over little things." Clara's voice dropped, silk turning to steel. "Do you understand me?" The girl nodded quickly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. She didn't look at Clara. She looked at the floor, at her reflection in the marble, pale and small and trembling. "Good girl," Clara said softly, as if that settled it. She turned, her heels clicking against the tiles as she walked away. The sound echoed, click, 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 fading into the distance, leaving the girl alone in the cavernous hallway. But Clara didn't realize someone else had heard the scream. From the far end of the hall, half hidden behind a doorway, Maria froze, the maid holding a folded blanket that suddenly felt heavy in her arms. She'd been working here long enough to know how silence worked in this house. Silence was survival. But this silence, this one was wrong. She peeked out, just enough to see the little girl standing motionless in the sunlight, her chest rising and falling fast. Clara's figure disappeared around the corner, her perfume lingering behind like a ghost. Maria's throat tightened. Her instinct screamed to rush in, to comfort the child, to say you're not alone. But fear clamped down like a hand on her shoulder. Clara had eyes everywhere. She'd seen what happened to the gardener who questioned her tone. Gone the next morning, no notice, no pay. So Maria stepped back into the shadow, pressing her back against the wall, heart pounding. From where she stood, she could still see the child through the doorway, small, fragile, hugging herself. Then, quietly, the girl turned her head toward the staircase that led upstairs, toward the portrait that hung there. A man's face stared down from the frame, sharp jawline, gray eyes, faint smile. Her father. The little girl whispered so softly Maria almost didn't hear it. "Please come home." And then she sank to her knees on the cold marble floor, clutching the hem of her nightdress, trying to hold herself together. Maria's eyes filled. She forced herself to move, one step back, then another, until she reached the laundry room. She shut the door silently, her breath shaking. Her hands trembled so hard the folded blanket slipped to the floor. She pressed a palm over her mouth, listening. Nothing but the faint echo of Clara's calm voice in the distance, humming as if nothing had happened. Maria sank onto the stool and whispered, "Dios mío." Because deep down, she knew what she'd seen wasn't a bad morning or a strict guardian. It was something far darker, something that couldn't be explained away by manners or temper. And though she didn't know it yet, that single scream, "Why are you so cruel to me?" would be the sound that changed everything. It would be the sound that finally reached a man's heart, miles away in a high-rise office where he still believed his daughter was safe. Morning light poured through the mansion's tall windows, scattering gold across polished floors and marble pillars. To anyone driving past, it looked like heaven, the kind of home people photographed from a distance and whispered about. Inside, it was too quiet. Every sound seemed out of place. The ticking of the antique clock, the soft hum of the espresso machine, the faint echo of footsteps in the hallway. Beauty lived here, but warmth didn't. At the long dining table, Clara sat in her cream robe, her posture perfect, her expression carved in calm control. A newspaper lay beside her untouched cup of coffee. She wasn't reading. She was waiting. Across from her, the little girl sat on the edge of her chair, shoulders hunched, small, fingers clutching the hem of her dress. Her eyes were still puffy from crying earlier, but she kept them down. A slice of toast sat untouched on her plate. "Eat," Clara said without looking up. The girl hesitated, then lifted the toast with trembling fingers. "Not like that," Clara corrected, her voice soft but sharp. "You're not an animal." The toast slipped from the girl's hand. It hit the plate with a sound that felt louder than it should have. Clara sighed, folding the paper. "Do you know what your father told me the first time we met?" The girl shook her head silently. "He said his daughter was gentle, sweet, sensitive." She paused, her eyes meeting the child's for the first time, cool, assessing. "I suppose that's one word for it." The girl looked confused. "Is that bad?" "Being weak always is." The girl's lips parted like she might speak, then closed again. Clara rose from the table with elegant precision, her heels clicking softly. "Clean your plate, then your room. Your father will call tonight, and I expect you to sound cheerful." She walked away before the child could answer. In the kitchen, Maria moved quietly, washing dishes that didn't need washing. She'd heard enough to know when silence meant danger. Through the doorway, she could see the girl sitting alone at the vast dining table, small against the expanse of luxury. Her hands stilled in the sink. She whispered under her breath, "Poor little soul." Clara's voice cut from behind her. "What was that?" Maria flinched, turning quickly. "Nothing, ma'am, just the faucet." Clara's eyes lingered on her a beat too long, long enough to remind her who owned this house, who controlled every word spoken within it. "You're paid to keep this place spotless," Clara said, "not to talk." "Yes, ma'am." Clara smiled faintly, then left, her perfume trailing behind her, expensive, suffocating. Maria watched her go, jaw tight. The moment she was gone, Maria glanced back at the girl, who was now carefully folding her napkin. Too carefully, as if afraid a crease out of place would mean another correction. She'd seen this before, the kind of cruelty that wore lipstick, the kind that smiled for neighbors and saved its venom for when no one else was watching. Upstairs, Clara entered her bedroom, their bedroom, and looked at the photo framed on the dresser. Adrian Hale, her husband, smiling beside his daughter on a beach, the sea behind them. The girl's arms wrapped around his neck, the sunlight catching her hair. A picture-perfect moment from a life before Clara. Her jaw tightened. She turned the photo face down. She didn't hate the child because she was cruel by nature. She hated what the child represented, the one part of her husband's world she could never possess. In the beginning, she'd tried to be patient. But patience soured when Adrian's business trips grew longer and the child's presence reminded her every single day that she was second to someone else's memory. And so, she began to correct, to discipline, to reshape. At least that's how she justified it. Downstairs, the girl stood on a stool to reach the sink, scrubbing her plate with soap. The water ran too hot and her small fingers turned red. Maria approached gently, drying her hands on her apron. "I'll do that, sweetheart." The girl shook her head quickly. "She said I should finish." Maria lowered her voice. "She's not here." The child looked up then, a flicker of surprise, confusion, and something almost like gratitude crossing her face. "You'll get in trouble," she whispered. Maria gave a small smile. "Maybe." She took the plate anyway. "Go play, Carino. Go draw something nice." The girl hesitated, then slipped off the stool, glancing once toward the hall before quietly padding away. When Maria turned back to the sink, she saw movement through the reflection in the window. Clara standing halfway down the corridor, watching. Their eyes met through the glass. Maria froze. Clara smiled, slow, polite, venomous, and kept walking. Maria exhaled shakily once she was gone, the sound of her heartbeat loud in her ears. Something was wrong in this house, something very wrong. But Maria didn't yet know how deep it went, how much darkness could hide beneath chandeliers and clean floors. And upstairs, under a turned-down photograph, Clara whispered to herself, "You'll learn your place, little one. Every child does." The house, perfect as ever, hummed quietly, pretending it hadn't heard a thing. Maria had worked for the Hales for almost a year, and she had learned quickly that silence wasn't just expected. It was required. In this house, quiet was currency, obedience was survival. Every morning she arrived before dawn, padding through polished hallways that never seemed to sleep. The scent of expensive candles clung to the air, mingling with the faint smell of disinfectant. Everything gleamed, the marble floors, the chandeliers, the lifeless portraits. It was a house that never looked lived in. But that morning, as she arranged fresh roses in a vase, Maria heard it again, that small, muffled sound from the east wing. A voice trying not to cry. She froze, her fingers trembling slightly around the stems. Then she turned the faucet on, loud, just in case someone was listening, and quietly stepped toward the noise. It came from the study. The door was ajar, just enough for her to see inside. The girl sat in a corner chair, head bowed, clutching her sketchbook against her chest. Clara stood before her, tall and composed, holding a torn page between her fingers, one the girl had drawn the night before. Maria could see what was on it even from where she stood, a picture of a man and a little girl holding hands under a big yellow sun. The man was smiling. The woman beside him wasn't. Clara's voice was calm, but her words sliced clean. "You think this is funny? Drawing lies?" The girl's small voice shook. "It's not a lie." "Oh?" Clara tilted her head, a faint smirk curling her lip. "You think that's how we look? You think that's our family?" "It's Daddy and me." Clara's smile froze. Then, without warning, she ripped the drawing in half. The girl gasped. "No!" She reached forward instinctively, but Clara's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but enough to remind her who was in control. Maria's throat tightened. She wanted to move, to shout, to say stop, but her feet felt nailed to the floor. Clara released the girl's wrist slowly, letting the torn pieces flutter to the floor like feathers. "Go to your room," she said flatly. "You can draw again when you learn respect." The girl didn't argue. She just gathered the ripped paper from the floor, holding it against her chest like it could be fixed somehow. Then she walked toward the door, and that was when she saw Maria. They locked eyes for a split second. The girl didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her eyes said everything. "You saw." Maria stepped back instinctively, guilt washing over her like cold water. By the time she found her voice, the child had disappeared down the hall. She waited until Clara's footsteps faded, then slipped into the study. The torn pieces of the drawing still lay on the carpet. Maria knelt and gathered them carefully, her hands shaking. The child's art was simple, a smiling man, a bright sky, a stick figure girl holding his hand. The innocence of it made the room feel colder. Maria pieced the halves together gently, smoothing the wrinkles. Her chest felt heavy. "She's just a baby," she whispered. That night Maria couldn't sleep. Every sound from upstairs made her flinch, the creak of the floorboards, the faint echo of Clara's heels, the small sounds that might have been crying through the vent. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering the look in the girl's eyes, not just fear, but loneliness. She thought about her own daughter back home in Mexico City, grown now, with a family of her own. She used to call every Sunday, voice full of laughter. But Maria hadn't called in weeks. Work, she always said. Work and bills and visas. Now she couldn't stop thinking about the child sleeping just above her, or not sleeping. The next morning, Maria made sure she was the one to serve breakfast. The girl came down slowly, her hair still damp, wearing a pale blue dress too neat for her small frame. She slid into her chair silently. Clara sat across from her, scrolling on her phone. "Good morning," Maria said softly, setting down a bowl of fruit. The girl managed a tiny smile. "Thank you." Clara looked up. "Don't encourage her." Maria froze. "Pardon, ma'am?" "Children should be seen, not coddled." Yes, ma'am, Maria murmured, backing away. The girl looked down quickly, hiding the faint redness in her eyes. Later that afternoon, Maria found the torn drawing in the trash bin outside. The edges were smeared, the colors faded from tears or water. She smoothed it again and slipped it quietly into her apron pocket. She wasn't sure why. Maybe she just couldn't stand the idea of it being thrown away like that. That night she placed the picture inside an empty drawer in her quarters. It felt like a small act of defiance or protection. As she lay down, she whispered to herself, "Un día, mi niña. One day, someone will see what's happening here." But she didn't yet know that someone was already on his way, and the sound that would bring him back wasn't a phone call or a message. It would be another cry, one even louder, one that no locked door could contain. Adrian Hale was a man whose world was measured in numbers, profits, deadlines, contracts. For years, he had built his empire on precision and control. It was easier to manage figures than feelings, easier to negotiate deals than the fragile needs of an 8-year-old girl who looked too much like the wife he had lost. His office was a cathedral of glass and quiet power. The city stretched out beneath him, glowing, restless, alive. On his desk, a framed photo sat among folders and reports, his daughter smiling in a sunlit garden, missing 2 front teeth, holding a balloon twice her size. It had been taken 3 years ago, before the mansion, before Clara. He rarely looked at it now. It hurt too much. That afternoon, he leaned back in his chair, exhaustion dragging at his eyes. His phone buzzed, a reminder from his assistant. "Call home tonight." Clara mentioned an incident with Lily. He sighed. Clara's voice echoed in his memory, refined, patient, composed. "She's struggling, Adrian. She misses structure. You spoil her. I'm only trying to help." He'd believed her, because believing was easier than questioning. Clara made his life tidy, respectable. She knew which tie matched his meetings, which wine charmed investors, which smile disarmed boardrooms. She'd promised stability, and he'd taken it like a man desperate for peace. He pressed the call button. The line rang 3 times before Clara's voice answered, smooth as ever. "Darling, how's New York?" "Long," he said, glancing at the skyline. "How's home?" "Peaceful," she said. "Your daughter's better. We had a small misunderstanding this morning, but I handled it." He frowned. "Handled?" "Just a bit of attitude. She needs consistency, Adrian. You can't let guilt make you weak." He didn't like that word, weak, but he let it pass. "Can I talk to her?" A pause, then light laughter. "Oh, she's asleep already. She had a long day." It was 7:20 p.m. "Oh," he said slowly. "All right then. Tell her I love her." "Of course," Clara said sweetly. "We both do." The call ended. Adrian sat there for a moment, phone still in hand. Something about her tone, the practiced warmth, scraped at him. He couldn't name it. It was the same feeling he got when a client smiled while lying. He opened his laptop again, but the numbers blurred. He pushed the photo of his daughter slightly forward on the desk, staring at her grin. The guilt he'd buried under work started to hum like a low frequency in his chest. She used to call him Daddy. Now it was Father. The distance had crept in so quietly he hadn't noticed. Back at the mansion, while he stared at that photograph, Lily sat on her bed tracing the edges of a bruise on her wrist. It wasn't from a blow, not exactly. It was from a grip, from being yanked away when she'd tried to reach for her drawing. She didn't cry anymore. Crying only made things worse. She looked at the clock. 7:35. He was supposed to call. She waited. 10 minutes. 20. Then she whispered to herself, "He forgot." The sound of Clara's heels echoed in the hallway. The door opened. "Lights out," she said. Lily looked up. "Did Daddy call?" Clara smiled, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "He's busy. You'll see him soon." "When?" "When you learn to behave." The words hit harder than any slap. Clara turned off the light. The door clicked shut. In the darkness, Lily curled up under her blanket, pressing her doll to her chest. "I'm not bad," she whispered into its fabric. "I promise." Miles away, Adrian poured himself a drink and watched the city lights flicker like warnings. The guilt wouldn't leave. He remembered the way Lily used to chase him down the hall, the sound of her laughter echoing through smaller, humbler walls. His late wife used to say, "She gets quiet when she's scared, Adrian. Don't mistake silence for peace." He finished his drink in one swallow. Maybe it was just work stress. Maybe Clara was right. Still, he picked up his phone again and opened his voicemail. There was one unheard message, time-stamped 2 days ago. He hit play. A faint sound filled the room, his daughter's voice, small, fragile. "Hi, Daddy, I just wanted to say I miss you. I drew something for you. Can you come soon, please?" Then a pause. A soft sniffle. "I'll be good." The line clicked off. Adrian's throat closed. He sat motionless for several seconds, the weight of that tiny voice pressing down on him until he felt it in his bones. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he whispered, "What am I doing?" He didn't know that at that same moment, in that same quiet house, his daughter was whispering the same thing to herself, word for word. Rain lashed against the mansion windows that evening, streaking down the glass like a warning no one could hear. The storm outside mirrored the storm within. Dinner had been served, or rather, endured. The clatter of silverware, the endless hum of polite conversation that wasn't conversation at all. Clara at one end of the table, immaculate as always, cutting her steak with surgical precision. The little girl at the other end, quiet, hands folded in her lap, afraid even to chew too loudly. The sound of a fork slipping from small fingers broke the silence. Clang. It hit the marble and rolled to the side. Clara's eyes lifted slowly from her plate. "Pick it up," she said. The girl scrambled down, knees brushing the cold floor. Her fingers searched under the table, heart pounding, while Clara watched, eyes unblinking, a small, cruel amusement tugging at her mouth. "You can't even hold a fork properly," Clara said softly, voice smooth as glass. "Do you know how embarrassing that is?" The girl stood again, trembling. "I'm sorry." "You're always sorry. It's exhausting." "I didn't mean—" "Enough." Clara's hand struck the table, the sound sharp in the cavernous dining room. The glassware trembled. The girl froze. From the doorway, Maria stiffened. She'd come to clear plates but stayed still, eyes darting between them. She knew that look in Clara's face, the calm before the cruelty. Clara rose from her chair slowly. "You think this house runs on your tears?" The girl shook her head quickly, voice breaking. "No." "Then stop acting like a victim." Clara stepped forward, her shadow falling across the small frame before her. "Your father has given you everything, food, clothes, a home most children would dream of. But you," her words dripped venom, "you sulk, you whimper, you make everyone miserable." The girl's eyes filled. "I just want—" "What?" Clara snapped. "Love? You think that's earned by pity?" The little one took a trembling step back, clutching her doll tighter. "You're mean to me." Clara laughed, soft, cruel, almost pitying. "Mean? No, darling. I'm teaching you how the world works. People like you either learn discipline or end up worthless." The girl's tears spilled over now, her breathing uneven. "Why are you so cruel to me?" It wasn't a question. It was a cry, raw, heartbroken, piercing enough to still the air. Maria's hand went to her mouth. For a split second, Clara faltered, the words hanging between them like a mirror she didn't want to look into. Then her voice hardened again. "Because you make it easy." The room went silent. The clock ticked. The rain hit the glass harder. Maria couldn't take it anymore. She stepped forward, voice shaking. "Ma'am, please." Clara turned sharply. "Stay out of this. She's just a child. And you're just the help," Clara hissed. The girl stepped closer to Maria, tears streaking down her small face. "Please don't let her." Clara seized the child's wrist. Not a slap, not a shove, but a grip meant to remind her who held control. The girl winced, twisting slightly. Maria moved without thinking. "Let her go!" Clara's head snapped toward her, eyes blazing. "You're fired!" Maria's heart thundered. "Then fire me, but you let her go." The girl whimpered. The tension thickened until it could snap. Then, a voice cut through the chaos, deep and furious. "Take your hands off her!" Clara froze. The little girl's head turned toward the doorway, and there he was, Adrian. Still in his travel coat, rainwater dripping from his shoulders, suitcase half dropped at his feet, his face pale, rigid, disbelief and fury woven together. The room stopped breathing. Clara's hand slipped from the child's wrist as if burned. "Adrian." He stepped forward slowly. "I just walked through the door, And this is what I see? Listen to me. I am, he said, his voice low but shaking. Go on, explain. Clara's tone turned honeyed. She exaggerates. You know how sensitive she is. She broke a plate and I taught her a lesson, he finished sharply. She blinked. Don't twist this. You leave her for weeks, Adrian. Someone has to teach her structure. The girl ran to him then, small arms wrapping around his leg, clutching him as if she couldn't believe he was real. He dropped to his knees instantly, hands trembling as he touched her shoulders, her face. What did she do to you? He whispered, but the words weren't for an answer. They were for himself. Behind him, Clara's voice sharpened. This is exactly why she disrespects me. You reward her tantrums with affection. He turned his head slowly. His eyes, once calm and distant, burned now with something primal. Tantrums? His voice broke. You call this fear a tantrum? She's manipulating you, Clara spat, losing composure for the first time. You're too blinded by guilt to see it. And then, he shouted, because she's better than you'll ever be. It wasn't rage. It was something deeper. Grief turned to thunder, the sound of a man realizing too late that his silence had built the cruelty he now faced. The echo of his voice filled the house, drowning out the rain, the ticking clock, everything. For the first time since her mother's death, the girl felt safe. And for the first time since her marriage began, Clara felt fear. The silence after the scream lingered like smoke. Clara stood in the middle of the room, her face frozen in disbelief, hand trembling slightly, not from guilt, but from fear of exposure. Adrian's words still hung in the air. She's better than you'll ever be. Maria didn't move. The little girl clung to her father's leg, her shoulders shaking, whispering something only he could hear. Adrian finally straightened, his jaw set. The control that had defined his life, his calm, his diplomacy, his restraint, cracked wide open. He pointed toward Clara. Out of my sight. Adrian, please, she began, stepping forward, her voice turning syrupy. You're emotional. You've been gone for days and you're misunderstanding. I walked in and saw you grabbing my daughter, he snapped. His voice was low but heavy enough to silence the rain itself. I don't need interpretation, she blinked rapidly, lips trembling. You think I hurt her? Adrian, she plays you. She cries to get what she wants. He took a step forward. Enough. The sharpness in his voice made even Maria flinch. If you speak about her like that again, he said, I swear I won't be able to stand here calmly. Clara's eyes darted between them, her mind racing, the polished surface of her world beginning to splinter. Maria swallowed hard, stepping closer to the child. Sir, she said softly, may I? He nodded once. Maria knelt and checked the girl's wrist, a faint mark, red, fresh. She looked up, her expression breaking. Clara's voice came out a hiss. Don't you dare act like I'm a monster. Adrian looked at her, truly looked, and said nothing. It was worse than shouting. He turned to Maria. Has this happened before? Maria froze. She'd practiced silence for so long that speaking the truth now felt like walking barefoot on glass. Sir, It happened. Maria's eyes filled. Yes, Clara spun toward her, fury flaring. You liar! Enough! Adrian's voice thundered through the hall. Not one more word! The echo carried down the corridor. For the first time, Clara looked small. He took his phone out, his hand shaking. Not with hesitation, but with fury. He dialed, his voice steady now, cold. Detective Raines, please. Yes, it's Adrian Hale. I need an officer at my residence immediately. Clara's composure broke. You're calling the police? Over this farce? This isn't a farce, he said quietly. This is my child. She stepped closer, eyes wild. You'll ruin me. He met her gaze without flinching. You did that yourself. The girl stood beside Maria, clutching her doll. Her father turned toward her slowly, kneeling again. I'm here, he said softly. I'm not going anywhere. Her voice came out in a whisper. You saw her. I saw everything. Her lip trembled. I told her you'd come. Adrian's throat tightened. You were right. She looked down at her doll, its cracked porcelain face, the one she'd kept even when Clara had tried to throw it away. She said you forgot me. He swallowed hard. Never. I tried to believe the best. I shouldn't have. I should have listened sooner. Maria stood a few steps back, wiping her eyes. The storm outside was dying down now, rain fading into mist, the sound replaced by the distant hum of police sirens approaching. Clara turned toward the window, face pale. "You're making a mistake, Adrian. She'll hate you for this." He looked at her one last time. "She already hates what you've done." When the officers arrived, the grand house no longer looked elegant, just hollow. The walls that had hidden so much felt like they were watching. Detective Raines, a tall, weary man with gray at his temples, stepped inside, nodding politely. "Mr. Hale." "Detective," Adrian said. His voice was clipped, businesslike now. "You'll find what you need here." Clara tried to smile, smoothing her robe. "This is absurd. There's been a misunderstanding." The detective raised an eyebrow. "Then you won't mind if we sort it out properly." He gestured to Maria. "Ma'am?" Maria hesitated, glancing at Adrian, who gave a small nod. Then she told them everything: the bruises, the shouting, the way the girl flinched when footsteps approached. The officer wrote quietly, eyes flicking between them. Clara's voice trembled. "You're taking the word of a servant over mine?" Adrian's tone was ice. "I'm taking the word of someone who was brave enough to tell the truth." The detective closed his notebook. "Mrs. Hale, we'll need you to come with us for questioning." She laughed, but it cracked halfway through. "You can't be serious." The handcuffs clicked softly. Not dramatic, not violent, just final. Adrian didn't look away. Clara's voice rose as they let her out. "You'll regret this, both of you." The door closed. The sound of the lock echoed through the house, softer than thunder, but louder than her scream had ever been. When it was over, Maria knelt beside the little girl, brushing hair from her face. "It's done, Michiello. She can't hurt you anymore." The girl looked at her father, almost afraid to believe it. "She's gone?" He nodded, his voice breaking. "She's gone." She threw her arms around him, her small body trembling. He held her tight, burying his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of safety. Maria turned away for a moment, wiping her tears with the edge of her apron, whispering a quiet prayer. Outside, dawn broke, pale gold light spilling through the rain. The house, for the first time in years, felt like a home again. And as the light touched the child's face, she whispered into her father's chest, "I knew you'd come." He closed his eyes, whispering back, "I'll never be late again." Morning light spilled into the house like something fragile and new. For the first time in months it was quiet, not the fearful silence that used to choke every corner, but a deep, cleansing calm. Adrian stood by the kitchen window, watching the sea of clouds drift past the tree line. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, hair uncombed, the exhaustion beneath his eyes softened by relief. The smell of coffee and toasted bread filled the air. Simple smells. Human smells. Behind him, small footsteps padded across the tiled floor. "Daddy?" He turned. Lily stood in the doorway, still in her pale nightdress, her doll tucked under one arm. The sunlight hit her face, and for the first time, he noticed how pale she was, how thin her wrists looked, how careful her smile had become. He knelt down, trying to smile. "Morning, sweetheart." She hesitated before walking closer. Is she gone?" He nodded. "Yes. She won't be coming back." Her little shoulders eased, just barely. She looked around, as if expecting Clara's voice to echo from somewhere. When it didn't, she whispered, "It's quiet." "Too quiet?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "No. I like it." Maria stepped into the kitchen carrying a tray, toast, warm milk, fruit cut into small stars. When Lily saw her, her face brightened a little. "Buenos dias, mi niña," Maria said softly. "You must be hungry." Lily nodded, climbing onto a chair. She picked up a piece of fruit and stared at it as if she wasn't sure what to do with kindness anymore. Adrian watched her in silence, guilt carving deeper lines across his face. "How long?" he asked quietly, his voice low so Lily couldn't hear. Maria hesitated. "Too long," she said finally. "But she's safe now, senor. That's what matters." He nodded, though his throat tightened. "I thought I was doing right by her, giving her comfort, stability." Maria met his eyes. "Children don't need perfection, sir. They need presence." That hit harder than he expected. He looked at Lily again, eating quietly, carefully, as if afraid of making a sound. After breakfast, they went outside. The air was clean, washed by the night's rain. The garden was still damp, roses bending under droplets of water. Lily walked barefoot on the path, the doll in her hands. She stopped near a puddle and stared at her reflection, small, serious, but no longer afraid. Adrian joined her, hands in his pockets. "Do you remember when we planted those?" he asked, nodding at the roses. She shook her head. "No, maybe Mom did." His chest tightened. "She did." Lily crouched and touched one of the petals. "They're pretty." She loved them. Lily looked up at him, eyes wide and curious. "Did she love me?" The question cut through him like glass. He swallowed. "She loved you more than anything. She used to tell me you were the best part of both of us." She smiled faintly. "Then she's still here." He knelt beside her. "Yes," he said softly. "I think she is." Later, as the afternoon light dimmed, Adrian sat in the study surrounded by files and photographs. He wasn't a man who cried easily, but now, with the weight of truth sitting across from him, the tears came quietly, not of rage or shame, but of release. Maria knocked softly and entered, holding a folded drawing. "She wanted you to have this." He took it carefully, unfolding it. It was a drawing, rough, colorful, imperfect, of a man and a little girl standing under a tree. The man had tears falling down his face, but he was smiling. "She said, 'That's you,'" Maria whispered. She said, "Now Daddy smiles again." Adrian's chest tightened. "She drew this today," Maria nodded. "While you were making calls, she said it feels different now, like the house can breathe again." He smiled weakly, eyes still wet. "So can I." Maria turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Sir," she said softly, "if I may, don't blame yourself too long. She needs you now, not the man who left, but the one who came back." Adrian nodded slowly, voice rough. "Thank you." When she was gone, he sat there for a long time, the drawing resting in his lap. Outside, he could hear laughter, faint, small, but real. His daughter, in the garden, laughing. He closed his eyes, listening like it was the most important sound in the world. That night, as he tucked her into bed, Lily asked, "Are the police mad at you?" He smiled softly. "No, sweetheart. They're helping us." She tilted her head. "Helping?" "Making sure no one hurts you again." She nodded, sleepy but content. "I dreamed Mommy said you'd come." His heart ached. "What else did she say?" Lily smiled faintly. "That I should draw you smiling." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Then I guess I'd better start practicing." She giggled quietly and closed her eyes. He stayed, there beside her until her breathing evened out. Only when she was asleep did he whisper the words he should have said long ago. "I missed you, baby girl, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." The wind outside stirred the curtains gently, carrying away the scent of roses. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt alive again. Days turned into a week, and the mansion, once a place of whispers and fear, began to change. Slowly, gently, like a wound learning how to close. The locks were gone from Lily's door. The heavy curtains had been drawn back to let the morning light in. And for the first time in years, the laughter of a child drifted through the hallways like sunlight breaking through dust. Maria was the first to notice the difference. Every morning when she came in to make breakfast, she'd find Adrian and Lily already in the kitchen, him clumsily flipping pancakes, her sitting on the counter with flour on her nose, giggling uncontrollably. "Daddy, you burned that one," she'd say, pointing at the slightly blackened edge. He'd grin. "That's not burned. That's extra flavor." Maria would shake her head, smiling as she poured juice. It wasn't the mansion she'd first walked into. It wasn't the cold, immaculate house that smelled of candles and silence. Now it smelled like toast and laughter. In the evenings, they'd walk the garden together, the same garden where once only silence grew. Lily would talk endlessly, about school, about the stars, about the stories she'd read in bed with Maria. And Adrian would listen like every word mattered. Sometimes he'd stop her mid-sentence, staring at her in quiet awe. "What?" she'd ask shyly. "Nothing," he'd say softly. "Just, you sound happy." She'd smile. "I think I am." He never tired of hearing that, but there were moments too when the past crept back, small tremors in the calm. One night, She woke up from a nightmare. The house was dark, moonlight washing the floor, pale. She crept down the hall, trembling, clutching her doll. She found her father asleep on the couch, papers scattered on his chest. For a moment she hesitated, afraid to wake him. Then, softly, she whispered, "Daddy?" He stirred, immediately alert, sitting up. "Lily, what's wrong?" She didn't answer. She just climbed into his lap, curling up like she used to before everything changed. He held her, his arms tightening instinctively. "Bad dream," she nodded against his chest. He kissed her hair. "It's okay. Dreams can't hurt you, not anymore." She looked up at him, eyes heavy but serious. "She used to say I made her angry." He froze. "Who?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. He pulled her closer. "You didn't make anyone angry, sweetheart. You just made them see what they really were." Her eyelids fluttered. "What was that?" He smiled sadly. "Small." That weekend he took her to the ocean. The sun was bright, the waves rolling gently. Lily ran along the shore, her hair flying, her laughter sharp and clear. She collected shells, built crooked sandcastles, chased gulls that always escaped her. Adrian stood back watching, a man witnessing his second chance in motion. When she came running up to him, holding a seashell, she said, "I can hear the sea inside it." He knelt, listening too. "You're right. Do you think Mommy can hear us?" He hesitated. "I think she can." Lily smiled faintly, holding the shell against her heart. "Then I'll talk to her every day." And as the tide washed against their feet, Adrian realized healing wasn't loud. It was made of moments like this, quiet, honest, real. That night, as Maria locked up, she looked around and whispered to herself, "The house finally remembers how to breathe." It was Lily's 9th birthday. The house was alive with warmth, not from music or guests, but from the simple hum of love. Balloons lined the archways, sunlight spilled through the windows, and a cake sat in the center of the table, homemade, slightly lopsided, but beautiful. Maria stood at the counter, humming softly as she placed candles one by one. Adrian leaned over her shoulder with the same clumsy focus he once reserved for contracts. "How many?" he asked. "9, Maria said. "One for each year, and one more for luck." Lily came running in, barefoot, her white dress fluttering. "Can I light them?" Maria smiled. "Of course, mi amor. But careful." Adrian struck a match and handed it to her. The flame reflected in her wide brown eyes. No fear this time, just wonder. She lit each candle slowly, whispering something under her breath. "What are you saying?" her father asked softly. "A wish," she said. He smiled. "Can I hear it?" She shook her head. "If I tell, it won't come true." Maria laughed quietly. "Then keep it safe, Nina." When the last candle flickered to life, Lily looked up at her father, voice trembling just a little. "Will you stay this time?" The room went quiet. He knelt, meeting her eyes. "Always." She studied him for a moment, as if measuring the truth in his face. Then she smiled. "Then my wish is already true." After she blew out the candles, they all sat down together. Maria cut slices with exaggerated ceremony, while Adrian poured milk like champagne. They toasted with giggles and crumbs, and for the first time, the walls of the mansion felt like home. Later, Lily ran to her room and came back holding a folded paper. "I made something for you," she said shyly. Adrian unfolded it. Inside was a drawing. Himself, Lily, and Maria, standing together in the garden under a blue sky. "Who's that?" he asked, pointing at Maria. "She's family," Lily said simply. Maria froze, hand over her chest. Tears filled her eyes. "Ay, mi vida," Adrian smiled, his voice thick. "Then I guess we're all family now," Lily grinned. "Can we plant something today, like Mommy used to?" He nodded. "Anything you want." They went out to the garden, the earth soft from last night's rain. Lily dug a small hole while Adrian held a young rosebush. Maria knelt beside them, pressing her palms into the soil. As they placed the plant in the earth, Lily whispered, "This one's for her." Adrian covered the roots gently, his voice low. "And for you, for growing through everything." The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of roses, a scent that no longer brought memories of pain but of rebirth. Lily looked up at the sky, eyes bright. She'd like this, right? Adrian nodded. She would have loved it. That evening, when Maria left, Adrian stood in the doorway watching the sunset. The house behind him was filled with laughter. He turned to see Lily drawing again at the table, the same table that once held fear, now covered in crayons and scraps of joy. He walked over, kissed the top of her head, and whispered, "You changed everything, little one." She looked up, smiling. "No, Daddy. You came back." He smiled, pulling her into a hug, her small arms circling his neck. For the first time in a long time, Adrian Hale, the millionaire who thought success meant control, realized that the only empire worth keeping was the one that fit between his arms. Outside, the new rose caught the last light of the day, and inside, a promise lived, silent but eternal. No more fear, no more silence, only love. The next morning came with the gentlest kind of light, the kind that touched everything softly, as if afraid to disturb it. The ocean air drifted through the open windows, carrying the scent of salt and roses. Adrian woke before dawn, standing at the balcony that overlooked the garden. The sky was just starting to turn gold, and the new rosebush, the one Lily had planted for her mother, glowed faintly in the morning mist. He wrapped his hands around his coffee mug and took a slow breath. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man running from something. He felt present, rooted. Behind him, small footsteps padded across the floor. "Daddy?" He turned to see Lily, hair tangled, wearing her oversized pajama shirt, eyes still heavy with sleep. She rubbed them with her fists and said softly, "You're up early." He smiled. "Couldn't sleep." "Bad dreams?" "No," he said, kneeling down. "Good ones. I dreamed you were laughing." She tilted, her head. "That's not a dream, Daddy. That's real now." He laughed quietly, lifting her into his arms. She curled against him like she used to when she was little, her head resting on his shoulder. The world outside was quiet, the sky slowly waking. "Look," he whispered, pointing to the horizon. "See that? That's a new day." She nodded. "Does that mean everything bad is gone?" He hesitated, brushing her hair from her face. "Not gone," he said honestly, "but we don't have to live inside it anymore." Lily thought for a moment, then said softly, "Then we'll live in the light." Later that morning, Maria came by with groceries in her usual warmth. She found them both in the garden, Adrian fixing a wooden birdhouse and Lily sitting cross-legged on the grass, painting tiny seashells with pastel colors. "Buenos dias," Maria greeted. My, look at this place, like a new world." Lily looked up proudly. "It is new." Adrian smiled, hammer still in hand. "We're making it one." Maria set down the basket, pulling out fresh bread and strawberries. "Then it's time to celebrate, yes?" Lily grinned. "Again?" Maria laughed. "Always. Life is full of reasons if you know where to look." She handed Adrian a small envelope. "This came for you. From the police." He took it, tearing it open quietly. Inside was a short letter, formal but firm. Case closed. Child welfare clearance granted. Custody confirmed. He exhaled deeply, shoulders dropping. It wasn't just a legal ending. It was freedom, in writing. He folded the letter and slipped it into his pocket, then looked at Maria. "I couldn't have done this without you." She waved him off. "Nonsense. You did what fathers are meant to do. You came home." Lily looked up at him, smiling. "You did." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "I'm never leaving again." That evening, as the sun dipped low, they all sat on the porch together, the air glowing with orange light. The sound of waves rolled gently in the distance. Lily leaned against her father's arm, tired but peaceful. "Do you think Mommy can see us now?" Adrian nodded slowly. "I think she's right here, laughing with us." Maria smiled. "She must be proud. Look at her little warrior." Lily giggled, shy but proud. "I'm not a warrior." Adrian looked down at her. "Oh yes, you are. Stronger than all of us." She grinned. "Then I'm the boss." Maria laughed so hard her eyes watered. "Ay caramba, the boss of us all." Adrian raised his glass of lemonade. "To the boss." They clinked their glasses. No grandeur, no music. Just the simple sound of three people who had survived something unspeakable and made something beautiful out of what was left. The house behind them glowed with warm light. And in the garden, the new rosebush swayed gently in the sea breeze, alive, resilient, unbroken. Weeks passed, the seasons began to shift, spring melted into summer, and the world outside their windows came alive in color. Lily's drawings changed too. Gone were the lonely stick figures under gray skies. Now she drew fields and laughter and people holding hands. Once she even drew the mansion, only now it had wide-open windows and birds flying above it. Maria framed that one and hung it in the hallway. "So no one ever forgets how far we came," she said. Adrian smiled every time he passed it. Sometimes he'd stop, running his hand over the frame, remembering the sound of his daughter's cry the night he returned, and how that cry had turned into laughter. He wasn't the same man anymore. The stock market could rise and fall, contracts could crumble. None of it mattered like this, like being here, alive, inside the small, miraculous moments that truly counted. One afternoon, he came home early. He found Lily in the garden again, sitting in the grass with her sketchbook. The sun made her hair shine, and her doll sat beside her, newly dressed and clean. "What are you drawing?" he asked. She smiled without looking up. "Something secret. Can I see?" "Not yet," he chuckled, lowering himself beside her. "You're just like your mom, mysterious." She looked up at him, grinning. "That means I'm special, right? The most special." A soft wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint sound of the sea. "Daddy," she said after a moment, "when people are really bad, do they ever become good again?" He thought for a long time before answering. "Sometimes, but they have to want to." "Did she?" He exhaled slowly. "I don't know, but what matters is that you did. You never stopped believing in good things, even when no one showed them to you." She tilted her head. "Is that what makes me strong?" He smiled. "That's what makes you brave." Later that day, they drove to the orphanage near the edge of town, Maria's idea. They brought toys, art supplies, and boxes of books Lily had outgrown. The children ran to greet them, their laughter echoing through the courtyard. Lily handed a small girl a stuffed bear and said quietly, "He helps with bad dreams." Adrian watched her, his chest tightening with pride. "You're amazing," he whispered. She looked at him and smiled. "You taught me to be kind." He shook his head. "No, sweetheart, you taught me." That evening, as they returned home, the sunset painted the sky in crimson and gold. Lily leaned her head against the window, watching the light fade into the horizon. "Daddy?" "Yes?" "Do you think Mommy would like Maria?" He smiled, softly. "I think she'd thank her," she nodded thoughtfully. "Me too." When they arrived home, Maria was already there, cooking. The house smelled of herbs, garlic, and laughter. Lily ran to her and hugged her waist. "Smells good," she said. Maria laughed. "For my favorite girl, only the best." Adrian leaned against the doorframe, watching them, the two people who had rebuilt his entire life without ever asking for anything in return. That night, after dinner, Lily handed him her sketchbook. "You can see now." He opened it. The final page showed 3 figures standing hand in hand under a glowing sunrise, a man, a woman, and a little girl. Above them, written in careful, wobbly letters, "Home." He felt his throat tighten. "It's perfect," Lily beamed. "I told you it was a secret." He smiled through the blur of his tears. Best secret ever. She climbed into his lap, and together they looked out the window, at the roses swaying, the moon rising, and the world that had somehow found its way back to color. The tide was low that evening. The ocean breathed softly, stretching toward the horizon like a memory trying to return home. Adrian stood on the same beach where he and Lily had first come after everything fell apart. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. The world had gone quiet in that golden hour, only the sound of waves and a child's laughter. Lily ran ahead barefoot, her small footprints trailing behind her, the hem of her summer dress brushing the wet sand. She stopped at the shoreline and looked back, her hair glowing orange in the sinking light. "Daddy, come on!" He smiled and walked toward her, rolling his sleeves up, his shoes in one hand. Maria followed at a distance, camera in hand, capturing little moments, the kind that used to slip away unnoticed. When he reached Lily, she was crouched near a tide pool, staring at something gleaming. "Look," she said, pointing. He knelt beside her. Inside the shallow water lay a tiny seashell, pink, spiral, and perfect. "It's beautiful," he murmured. She picked it up carefully, holding it to her ear. "I can still hear it," she whispered. "The sea?" She nodded. "And Mommy." He swallowed hard, heart-catching. "What's she saying?" Lily tilted her head, pretending to listen. Then she smiled softly. "She says we did it." Adrian exhaled shakily, blinking away the tears that rose uninvited. "Yeah," he said, his voice low. "We did." They sat together on the sand, watching the sun dip lower, its reflection stretching across the water like a road of gold. Lily leaned against him, the shell still in her hands. "Do you think bad people know they're bad?" He thought for a moment. "Sometimes," he said, "and sometimes they just forget what good feels like." She nodded. "Then I'll never forget." He smiled faintly. "You already don't." For a while, neither spoke. The world around them was enough, waves rolling, gulls crying in the distance, the soft rhythm of peace returning. Back at the mansion later that evening, the garden was glowing under strings of fairy lights. Maria was in the kitchen, humming an old lullaby as dinner simmered on the stove. The scent of basil and lemon drifted through the halls. Lily came in, still sandy from the beach, clutching her shell. "Can we put this somewhere safe?" Adrian took it gently. "I know just the place." He walked with her to the garden. In the middle stood the rose bush they had planted months ago, now tall, full, and alive with color. The petals were the softest red, the kind that caught light even in dusk. Lily knelt and dug a small hole beside it. Together, they placed the shell inside and covered it with soil. "There," she said softly. "Now she's close to both of us." He nodded, kneeling beside her. "That's perfect." The wind moved through the roses, their fragrance rising like a blessing. Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Adrian sat by her bedside for a long time. The moonlight fell across her face, peaceful, untroubled. He remembered how she used to curl up in fear, waiting for footsteps that would never come again. Now she slept with her arms open, her doll resting beside her. He whispered, "You're safe, my brave girl." Down the hall, Maria stood quietly, watching from the doorway. She didn't speak, didn't move. She just smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. She turned away softly, whispering in Spanish, "Dios te bendiga, mi niña valiente." "God bless you, my brave little girl." The next morning, the sea breeze carried the scent of roses through the house again. Adrian brewed coffee, humming under his breath, a habit he never used to have. Lily came running in, hair flying, laughter bursting out of her like sunlight. "Daddy, come see! The rose bloomed again." He followed her outside. The bush was covered in blossoms, more than before, bright and alive. He reached out and touched one gently. "You know what that means?" She nodded solemnly. "She's still watching." He smiled, pulling her close. "Then we'll make her proud." They stood there in silence for a moment, father and daughter, survivor and protector, framed by the morning light and the scent of roses. Lily turned her face toward the sea, her voice small but certain. "It's not scary anymore." "No," he said quietly. "It's not." And as the waves shimmered beyond the garden and the wind moved gently through the house that once knew fear, the world seemed to whisper its agreement, soft, forgiving, eternal. The cruelty was gone. The silence was gone. All that remained was love, fragile, enduring, and infinite as the sea itself. A 9-year-old girl stands barefoot beside a blooming rosebush, holding her father's hand. The ocean gleams behind them under a soft sunrise, her hair's tousled, her face serene. In her other hand, a seashell glints faintly in the light. A story once born from pain ends in quiet grace, not with revenge, not with noise, but with peace, because the little girl who once screamed now simply smiles.